Do you think um, do you think we as a profession, we as pharmacists, do you think we're too late in trying to make that shift now? Do you think we dropped the ball so far back, when it comes to, because I've heard this, uh, um, I've heard this idea that, kind of one of the issues with our profession is that for so long we stuck to this, to the product. We stuck to,
Mhm.
hey, just leave me with this product, as opposed to thinking outside of that to the services that we can provide alongside those, the product. And we didn't really pay too much
Yeah.
attention to that, whereas you see nurses really kind of stepped into that role to now where they're, nurse practitioners. They've really kind of, increased what they're doing and, kind of gotten away from whatever their traditional, you know, not gotten away from it, but, really built on that. Do you think we as a profession missed the boat? And is it too
No,
late for us to do that?
no, I don't think we missed the boat at all. I don't think it'll ever be too late for a shift like that to happen. And we're talking about Amazon. I think Amazon's a good thing to point out. When Amazon first became a thing, they sold books.
Right.
That's it. They sold books online.
Yeah.
Now they're selling. Now they're your pharmacy. And I think just as how they were able to do that, I think we can do that as well as a profession. But you just the hard part is the effort behind it. So this could happen at any time. I don't think it's ever going to be too late. Even if this takes another 100 years, it's still not too late. The problem is that we just need to figure out ways to educate patients and educate consumers, and then also create products and services that are extremely valuable, to be able to offer these things to patients. So I do not think we missed the boat there. The challenge, though, is just figuring out a way to communicate our value, to consumers.
Do you think that we as a profession can really get on the same page to be able to drive some of these changes that we need to, or what is it going to take for pharmacy to get to that next level? Because yes, we need to be able to market, but one of the things that I feel like, kind of is an issue for us is that I don't think that we're even as unified as we need to be, as a profession. Whereas if you look at physicians, if you look at nurses, really even nurses, look at nurses, they still go on strike if you mess with any one of them, or if you try to, a hospital system tries to, do something that they don't like, they come together and collectively they can say, no, we're not going to stand
So
for this.
a lot of times, though, when you say they come together, a lot of times what that actually means is there's a large organization that represents them that has a lot of money.
Right.
So one thing that I think that we do need to do better at is having organizations where we're actively giving back money to lobby on our behalfs, because a lot of that, it comes down to like the size of and power of an organization, like the AMA, for example. If you look at the AMA versus APHA, the amount of money that AMA has compared to APHA is extremely, like, there's a very large gap there.
Yeah.
So, and that might come as it might come as a face of saying that they're together, when in the sense of they just have a lot of money collectively as an organization. And I think that, if you look at, for the most part, pharmacists, there's a lot of things that we likely agree on. And while there might be small things that we disagree on, when it comes to real large issues and external conflicts with like other organizations and like our role in healthcare, we're probably all on the same page. The problem is that we just don't have the organizing power to be able to like execute on what it is that we want to do. So I do think that there is a lot of opportunity for us to have an organization that's a powerhouse like the AMA, that is fighting on our behalf to do these things. But I do think it still comes down to, though, even when we have all of that power, let's say we get to a point where we have a lot of power and we're all on the same page, it's going to come down to our messaging and how we market ourselves. Like, I can't like hone in on the fact of how important it's going to be for us to actually market ourselves, like for real, as the experts in medicine and our role in healthcare. I think that is our biggest like opportunity, and that's going to be our best way to like getting to that level where we're on, the page that we know we should be on.
And so, with that being said, what's the best way to market ourselves as pharmacists? You know, because a lot of times we don't even think of ourselves. So one thing that I've seen is that we don't necessarily think of ourselves as highly as maybe other people view us. You know, we just kind of see ourselves, oh, we're just, you know, we just go in, we do this, we do that. Yeah, we'll, you know, talk to you about your medications, but we don't necessarily um, even have that value attached to ourselves that others might see us with. So how should we, what should we do if we need to be able to market ourselves better, to be able to position ourselves collectively as the drug experts that people trust, that people are able to come to?
So if I had a magic wand and I said like, this is what we would do, I would really get every pharmacist every pharmacist in the country to become the medical experts in their own community.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, most people have most of the general population have some connection to knowing someone that's a pharmacist or a pharmacy technician. So if we can get all of those people in their own little communities, in small towns in Alabama, large cities in New York City, or large areas in New York City, if we can get to a point where people realize that the pharmacist that they know is the expert in medications and therapy, that's, I think, the way it starts. Because those people then go to organizations that make decisions, or those people then go to a doctor and say, but my pharmacist said this. Those people are leading an organization that says, where's the pharmacist on the team? So I think if we take an approach of like bottom up, that would be, and I had a magic wand, that would be what I would do, is say, hey, like you, the average pharmacist at Walgreens or at the independent pharmacy, make it known that you are the expert in medications to your small circle. And then before we know it, the whole country knows it. And then it's just a matter of time before I think it starts to trickle upwards with our importance. That's kind of the magic wand. And I think it's probably different to a lot of other, the way people would approach it, but that would kind of be my goal. And it's what I did as well. I think the people in my circle know, like they trust me. And I know by my social media postings, by especially when the pandemic started, they looked to my advice. You know, my friends on Facebook would look to my advice and my thoughts about what was best, what's going on, you know, like how serious is the pandemic? Should they get the vaccine? Like there's so much that people, and it's only because I was able to establish that. They didn't just do that because they know as a pharmacist. They realize they've consumed all the content that I've created to help in the community. So I did the work to establish that. It wasn't like a given.
Yeah.
But then now in turn, they all realize that like I'm extremely knowledgeable in healthcare, and because they know me personally, I'm just that much more trustworthy.
Yeah, no, it's funny, kind of piggybacking off of that. During the pandemic, I don't know if you remember when the whole thing kind of, came out with hydroxychloroquine, and there was this group of doctors that came out really advocating for
I remember
hydroxychloroquine, and it was just this big thing for like a couple of days. An ex-girlfriend of mine that, I think we had broken up like maybe 4 years or so. I got a text message from her that same day, like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, or is this a cure and they're not letting us know? They don't want us to know about it, this or that. Is it, is it legit? And I told her, no, it's not, blah, 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 but yeah, being able to make sure that at least your circle, your immediate circle of people, your social network understands that, yeah, you're a pharmacist, but what does that mean? That means that you can be trusted with, their medication questions, and they can,
agreed.
You're an expert with that. I think that is very important, as you pointed out. And that's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. I think definitely pharmacy is at a place now, pushed by this pandemic, and we'll see what vaccination, this COVID vaccine does, as far as, people having to come to a pharmacy, and pharmacists being, kind of on the front lines administering these vaccines. We'll see kind of what that does as far as how it impacts the profession and the public trust in us and the public opinion of us. But I think it's definitely a good thing, and I think it'll, we'll look back and say, it definitely helped. And as we talked about earlier, also being able to get provider status will definitely help us as well. And but
Agreed.
going 20, looking from now, a few years down the line, I think pharmacy is definitely going to be different. Pharmacy is going to change. What do you think Amazon is going to do to the retail space?
Yeah, so I think what I think is going to happen is there's definitely pressure put on the community pharmacy space, but I think what it's going to force is the realization that dispensing medications, I think, is not really the sustainable model going forward. And when I say going forward, I'm thinking, 20, 30 years out. I'm not thinking about like someone that's starting a pharmacy this year, next year, but I think other services that are more profitable and vaccines are actually a good example of that. The reason why a lot of large companies push for vaccines is one, obviously for a public health and wellness perspective, but also it's extremely profitable to vaccinate someone compared to dispensing a medication for diabetes. So I think finding some of these alternative ways to actually create sustainable business models is what Amazon is being forced to do to retail. And like we had kind of mentioned earlier, a lot of people saying, well, retail's dead. I've been hearing retail's dead since I was in pharmacy school. So, and it's still really almost in a, obviously things have definitely changed, but it's still alive and well. It's alive and kicking. And I think it's still always going to be alive and kicking. It's just going to continue to change and innovate. And I think that's what something like Amazon Pharmacy is going to force the efficiency of dispensing. Yet it's going to open up the opportunities for some of these health services that Amazon probably will not be able to provide than a retailer or independent pharmacy can provide.
What do you, shifting gears slightly to, talk about kind of the social media aspect of the things that you do. What are some of the things that you've, being able to kind of market yourself through that, putting out content through that, you have a podcast, RX Radio, which if you haven't checked out, please go check it out and subscribe to it. You have a Facebook page, you have a Twitter, Instagram, all this stuff that you put out content on. How has that helped you? And not just, and I know you spoke a little bit to it when you were talking about how it helped you market and kind of get, new business, with in your previous, role. But even beyond that now, like, how is that helping you kind of engage with the public and build connections, that maybe you wouldn't have thought, were necessary? And why do you think that people should get be more vocal online as professionals?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's the networking piece of it. So right now with my current role, I've been heavily focused on creating content that's usually for other healthcare professionals and connecting with other healthcare professionals. And the amount of people and the amount of business that I've gotten over the last couple of years, I would not have been able to do that in person because the traveling to get there, it's also harder it's actually much harder to, even though you're in person, to build an instant connection with someone in person than it might be on social media. So, you can have a lot more random conversations on social media, especially on Twitter. You also know a lot more about a person if you connect with them on social media versus meeting them in person. Because when you meet them in person, it's like, hey, my name is Richard. I'm a pharmacist. I work for Target. Oh, what's your name? So it might take you 20 minutes to find out that, like, I live in Miami. Versus when you find someone on social media, possibly what location they're in, what their role might be, what their interest might be by just scrolling through their Instagram feed or their Twitter feed for 30 seconds. So there's actually so much more information that you have before you even say your first word to someone on social media. So there's an argument there. You might be able to connect better. But for me, it's just been the expansion of connections with people and the relationship building on there. I've built a lot of great friendships. I had people that have literally slept in my house because I met them on Instagram.
Wow.
And, you know, they're now a lifelong friend of mine that I've met on social media, and they're pharmacists. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunities for connecting and expanding your network that I think is people should highly consider. Even if it's, and I think what's important too is to realize it's actually not hard. And a lot of people overthink it. A lot of people think about, well, I can't create content, or I don't know how to create content. But you don't have to. You can just go and respond to other people's content. You know, you can go on and leave comments and message people online. You don't have to create your own. But eventually, you know, you would get there. But I think it's, a lot of people overthink that. And I think it's important to just create accounts on some of these popular ones like LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. I love Twitter. Twitter's kind of like my favorite. But I would highly, you know, encourage everyone that's listening, that's a healthcare professional, whatever industry you're in, to get on social media and start making those connections. Because you never know what it'll turn into, whether it's an opportunity for a new role, whether it's help supporting an initiative that you're doing at your current role. There's so many benefits to creating those connections.
Speaking of networking, there's something that I was talking to a friend of mine about not too long ago, about how, one of the things that I tell people to do is, when they're trying to, I've made a few videos about getting jobs and, how to get a job in the pharmacy or in a hospital job or whatnot. One of the things that I say is, networking is huge. And that, one of the things that I've, said is, to maybe go and join your local, ASHP chapter, and go out to their meetings, and, you're likely going to find people, from different health systems at those meetings, residency directors or coordinators, pharmacy managers, directors, whoever, and you're able to put a face to a name and, just kind of meet them one-on-one there. But now, obviously, with this pandemic, we're not able to do that as much. And everything is just kind of now, Zoom and things like that. How would you say that so one can still kind of do that networking piece at, with these, organizations during a pandemic, when not a lot of them are having in-person meetings anymore? Not a lot of them, I'm pretty sure ASHP, the mid-year was all virtual, right? Like, so how does one network in that scenario, or get the most out of that?
One important thing to do there is you actually have to recognize that your brand is important. And that's when your own sort of content creation does become important. So the things that you post, whether you're writing articles, whether you're creating Twitter threads or LinkedIn threads, I think that becomes important, because when you do meet people, it's actually easy to find the people now. Like, that's actually not the hard part. The hard part now is what do they understand about you and your brand, and then how are you communicating with them? So one thing I think is important to do is not ask for things that are too much too quickly. For example, like cold reaching out to someone and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. That's a tough, unless, you're just right place at the right time, like with extreme luck, and you're everything that person was looking for, or they maybe even heard about you, like that's not gonna be successful. Versus the, hey, I see that you're a pharmacy director, I'm really interested in health systems. Like, do you have 2 minutes just so I can pick your brain? Or not even messaging them, but more so commenting on something that they posted on LinkedIn or on Twitter. And then just doing that maybe a couple times a week and just staying connected with that person. Or finding that they're also I live in Miami, or they're also a Miami Heat fan, and you're a Miami Heat fan. And or you're on a rival team, and you're like, hey, like, I see you're a Heat fan. I'm an Orlando fan or whatever, like, yeah. So I'm a Rocket fan, and just little things like that over time go a long way. And I think it's very similar to realizing that connecting with people on social media is the same way as connecting in person. You don't walk up to someone in person and just be like, hey, I see that you're the pharmacy director. I'm really looking for a job. Like, can you help me? You don't do that in person, right? In person, it's like, hey, I see you're a healthcare director, or a pharmacy director. Like I've been really interested in hospital pharmacy, and so those are, you just have to realize you just have to try your best to mimic what you would do in person on social media, because it works almost exactly the same. But also realizing that now on social media they have more access to information about you, which is your brand and the things that you post on there. So just being cognizant of that.
How do you I know that you've talked about this on your podcast about, if you're really passionate about something, becoming the expert in that, in whatever that thing is, and kind of being able to kind of create opportunities for yourself. I know you've spoken a little bit about that in your podcast. What would you say to someone, maybe a new grad, a new pharmacist, whatnot, that's starting out and really looking to stand out and brand themselves, and kind of create whatever niche for themselves right now in 2020, even though the market is saturated, there's so many pharmacists out there, X, Y, and Z. How does one do that now?
What I'm telling people, if I'm talking to a new grad and I'm telling them how to do that, it's you're in full control of what you're the expert of. So you can be the expert of nothing, meaning that no one knows you're the expert of anything, or you can pick mRNA vaccines as what you're the expert in, and you can start tomorrow becoming that expert. And the way you start is, you don't start by saying I am the mRNA expert, vaccine expert, but you put in your bio, I'm passionate about mRNA vaccines. And then you start writing content about it, learning about it, writing about what you just learned, reposting articles about what you've learned, right, making videos, making a podcast specifically about mRNAs where you're interviewing other experts about that. It's creating content about the things that you learn, and not pretending to be things that you're not. But I do think that there's an importance in realizing that you are in full control of what you become the expert in. So and then there's no one that can tell you that you are or you are not the expert in something. It's up to you to create that for yourself. And you can do that with literally anything, whether it is the mRNA vaccine or whether you're going to be the expert at like baking chocolate chip cookies. Like, it's up to you to like make that decision for yourself, and you just become the expert at it by creating content, by actually learning about it. Sometimes that involves getting specific certifications, or if you want to get BCPS certified, things like that. But it's really just, you are in full control, especially with it being on social media. You're in full control of becoming that expert.
Right. And that, going back to Maurice, I love how he just uses comedy, in his integrates pharmacy into his comedy bits, and he's the RX comedian, and he does these skits. He's a legit pharmacist, and he's a legit comedian at the same time. And he's actually funny. He's good. And so that's awesome. That's amazing. One of winding down. This has been a great segment and great talk. I know a lot of pharmacists that may be listening are kind of might be a little discouraged with the way things are going, as far as you see wages dropping, you see jobs are not as abundant anymore, the market is saturated, X, Y, and Z. I know in one of your podcasts I was listening to, you spoke about even though we might not see these specific pharmacy jobs being posted as much, there are jobs that may not necessarily have pharmacist in the title, but that that are newer jobs that are being created, or that are really on new realms and niches for pharmacists that pharmacists can get into. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how a pharmacist can really either look for that or try to get into things like that?
Yeah, so I think what's really interesting about pharmacy is that while we are the medication experts, a lot of time we are also the patient engagement and patient experience experts. And for example, there are many roles in large organizations that the title is like patient experience officer or chief experience officer. And a lot of times this is about the patient journey. And the pharmacist a lot of times is involved with like beginning to ending of a patient journey. And we have a lot of knowledge about exactly how that transpires. So realizing that anything that's involving a patient experience in any organization likely is a perfect fit for a pharmacist. I also think that there's sales opportunities. A lot of times people don't realize that healthcare providers are probably some of the greatest salespeople that are out there. And the reason is we're great at listening, and we're great at providing and like being empathetic to situations and providing as much value as possible. And that's actually like the key like ingredients to being a great salesperson and being able to communicate. So there's also a lot of sales roles in healthcare organizations that are performance based, that you can probably outperform from a salary perspective what you might be making at a community pharmacy, because you're a great salesperson in a healthcare organization. So, you know, those are things I would also look towards. And then, you know, creating roles for yourselves where maybe you're working at a health system as a staff pharmacist, but you establish yourself as a brand for a specific disease state. For example, like you establish you're really passionate about inflammatory diseases. And then all of a sudden your pharmacy says that, you know, we want to now do a specialty pharmacy, and they're trying to think about who would lead that or who would be on that team. But for the last 3 years, you're a staff at a community pharmacy and your health director knows that you're passionate about inflammatory diseases and specialty medications. You're the first person they're going to think about for that role. So it's also about setting yourself up and being in positions that are, you know, a lot of times, and this actually brings up something that I think is very like near and dear to my heart about what luck is, and how I really believe in the cliche saying of like luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Right. And I think if you are preparing yourself and putting yourself in a position to be an expert in something that you're passionate about, you're preparing yourself for the opportunity that might present itself. And then all of a sudden you have this dream job, and then people say you're lucky, right? But you've been working for years about honing in on a craft and making sure you're ready and prepared for that. And the opportunity just presents itself and boom, you strike. So I think it's kind of thinking outside the box of how there's a lot of things that pharmacists have skill sets to be able to do in other organizations. But then also realizing that you have to start becoming cognizant of what it is that you're really good at, what skills you have that you need to kind of craft, and what sort of topics you're passionate about. And I think that that's kind of the keys to success there. And the podcast RX Radio, like I have a lot of people on there that have unconventional roles. So if that is something that you're looking towards, or seeing what people in pharmacy are doing kind of outside of the realm of just being a regular community pharmacist or regular health pharmacist, health system pharmacist, you can definitely check out the podcast. So
nice. That's definitely very great advice that you've given. I know we've covered, you know, quite a lot of topic and ground, but, you know, just wrapping up, any last bit of advice you might want to give for anybody, whether it's pharmacists, whether it's just, you know, whoever that's listening, that's in their career, but is looking to get into the next thing, or it feels like they're stuck, feels like, you know, they don't like where they are, and they want to know how to even think about getting into something else. Because they, you know, for 20 years they've been a pharmacist, for 20 years they've been whatever, a mechanic or a dentist or whatever. You know, is there any last bit of advice that you can give to someone who wants to pivot?
Yeah, I think for someone that wants to pivot, if I had advice, would be this day and age, 2020, in the world of social media and technology and the internet, is the best time for someone to want to pivot. And the reason I say that is because if you wanted to pivot 30 years ago, good luck, because you would have had to gone to school, get a degree, do years of networking with people, like to find a new role. But I myself tomorrow, and this is funny, like this is actually super funny to think of. I'm not going to do this, but let's just say I did. I'm super interested right now in learning Japanese, right? I actually just got this book in Amazon, where it's just like 1,000 Japanese vocabulary. Let's just say tomorrow I wanted to become an English-Japanese teacher, or vice versa. I wanted to teach Japanese. I can tomorrow start a social media page saying, hey guys, I'm an American, I'm learning Japanese, and I'm going to become a Japanese teacher. And I could start from there a social media page teaching people Japanese while I learn it myself. And in 5 years, I would actually be a legitimate Japanese teacher if that's what I wanted to do. And I can create courses. I can write a book about my journey and sell that. I could actually go work at a school teaching it. So I can start that tomorrow because of things like social media. I would not have been able to do that normally. And I think that's obviously an extreme parallel from, leading a digital healthcare company to going and being a Japanese teacher. But you can do that, and it should be especially easy if it's within like your realm of the field. So if I now tomorrow wanted to go and say that, just trying to spitball something here, but if I tomorrow wanted to kind of shift gears from digital patient education, I wanted to go into specialty or even pharma, I can just start becoming that expert and start creating content for that. But the thing that I really want to hone in though is that like you're in full control of your destiny for that, because the tools are all there for you to become that expert, for you to pivot. You know exactly how to find the people to talk to. You might have to talk to 100 of them to get to where you want to get to, but the people you're easily able to find them.
Yeah.
And I think that just realizing that if you feel stuck right now, you are in the best time of your life in the place of the world with the way technology is now to be someone that's stuck, because you can easily pivot. When I say easily pivot, you can pivot with hard, it's funny, I say you can easily pivot with a lot of hard work. You can actually pivot during this time, whereas you might not have been able to pivot at all if you were born in a time where we were still using dial-up internet or before even the internet was available. So I think just realizing that you are in full control of your destiny at this point. And, if you feel stuck, I think what becomes important, you mentioned like someone that's been a pharmacist for 20 years. I imagine that person has a lot of responsibilities. They may have a family. They may be trying to start a family, or, they may just not be super motivated. But I think it's just figuring out a way to start somewhere, even if it's 1 hour at 9 p.m. on Mondays, and then letting that turn into 2 hours at 9 p.m. on Mondays to 2 hours at 9 p.m., 2 hours on Monday and 2 hours on Wednesday. And then over time, just building your way to that pivot. But at the end of the day, just realizing that you, I think, are in full control of your destiny and kind of what you kind of decide that you want to do with your career, whether you're 20 years in or whether you're just getting started.
That's amazing. You're absolutely right. What are some of the greatest pivots that you've seen pharmacists do?
That's a good question. The thing that comes to mind immediately is Mike Corvino, which it's funny because he's the person I mentioned earlier that he's someone I met on Instagram. And one day he came to Miami and he slept at my house, and we hung out for a weekend. He was a community pharmacy at Walgreens, and he did not do residency, very passionate about being a clinician, being an expert clinician. And he created a podcast. He started creating content. He then became an adjunct or associate professor at a PA school, and then he got like a very prominent role in a health clinic. And I think now, and then he got BCPS certified, and now he's someone that I think will go on to be one of the probably well-known clinicians of pharmacy. And he was, a quote unquote regular community pharmacist out of school with no expert, no residency training. So to me, that's amazing. And to me, that's kind of a testament of kind of what, something similar to what I went through, and just realizing that I wanted to do a lot more. And I didn't care about what I did or did not do in the past. It was what I wanted to do tomorrow. And I think he's also a testament of that. Is he told himself, yes, I'm working at a Walgreens right now, but I know I want to do more. And he worked like many hours at night after work, most of the days off. He would create a lot of this content, create his own brand. And he was able to pivot into what he might consider a dream job now. And he's well on his way to establishing himself as a prominent clinician in all of healthcare.
Nice. When I think of that, I think of a friend of mine, similarly, who I remember she was working in community pharmacy, and I know she called me one day and she was like, hey, how do I, she wants to, kind of get into not just hospital, but she wants to get into more administration, healthcare administration, things like that. And I was like, well, you could, kind of, one way that I know about it, how to get into that is, kind of through the hospital side, getting into, management, being a director, and then from there you can maybe leave pharmacy and get into the C-suite and things like that. And she's like, well, she's at the community pharmacy right now. How does, I'm like, well, you either you can get a residency, or you can just try to go somewhere, some small town like I did, and see, get into a pharmacy, get into a hospital that way. Long story short, she got a residency, and now she's kind of well on her way to becoming, she's in a hospital now. She's finished. It's been almost 2 years, and she's going into she's in a hospital, and she's definitely still trying to get into administration. Awesome. She had already started taking, like, it was not an MBA, maybe an MHA, or one of those like advanced degree courses at the university out here. But yeah, someone like that. I have another friend who was a pharmacist. He went back to school, became a dentist, just finished, and now he's practicing as one. And it's just different people who just, they decide they want to do something, and they just go for it. I feel too many times people just feel like they can't do something because, well, I'm here now. I have a family. I have this. I have, I can't start over. I can't, but it's definitely doable. It's definitely doable. And for those that are interested in those stories, I've had both of these individuals on my podcast talking about how they, their journeys and stuff. But no, thank you so much, Richard. This has been incredibly amazing to have you on. It's just to talk about pharmacy, to talk about healthcare, to talk about where the profession is, where we're going. I definitely appreciate the time. I know the one last thing that I want to mention. You've talked about it a lot on your on your podcast. I don't want us to not mention it, because when it becomes big and when it actually happens, I don't want us to not to have been the one podcast to not mention it. But you've talked a lot about voice, and how voice is going to be, kind of the next big thing in healthcare. With Alexa and just these different devices. Where do you see that going?
Yeah, so I think everything that we do right now on our mobile devices is something that we're going to do through voice, whether that's calling for an Uber, whether that's ordering pizza, ordering food, whether it's learning about your medications. I think that voice is going to be probably the next biggest platform to be able to provide some of those services. I think it got slowed down a lot by the pandemic, because voice, I think, was mostly something that was a nice to have, and something that was, kind of futuristic thinking about what can be built on there. And people really had to kind of hone in on the absolute necessities of getting through the pandemic. But I think once we start to get on the other end of it, we're going to start to see a lot of innovations happen in the voice space. So it's definitely a really interesting thing to keep an eye out. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
This has been great. I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate, just how gracious you've been towards me just in the last few weeks that we met. I'm humbled, to say the least. But thank you. It's been a great talk. It's been a great podcast. Definitely learned a lot. I think a lot that even I myself can use, and I think my listeners also will be able to use that, especially just learning how to become an expert in a subject, and just really take that and use that to branch off into whatever you want to get into. I think that's definitely very valuable information.
Well, I definitely appreciate that, and it's my pleasure.
Thank you, sir. And this has been, thank you for listening. This has been another great episode of Highlighting Greatness with Asayo. We will catch you on the next time. Thank you.